Hello, good evening, everybody. Welcome to Students Study Circle Meet, Jnanarjane. Empowering the excellence of you guys in each and every subject we have been doing from past many days, rather many years. So this welcome to this wonderful session. Today we have a renowned speaker, CA Madhu Keshavar Hegde, who is today going to speak about the income from house property, one of the most complex and a simple aspect as well. So I hope you guys would learn more and unlearn something which is old and relearn the new things so that you can add it to the your treasury of the knowledge. I wholeheartedly welcome CA Madhu Keshwar Hegde to the session.
Thank you. Thank you.
And today we have Divya, the member of SICASA Student Union. So I welcome her out to the session. So now I'm handing over session to the Divya so that she can introduce you guys more about the speaker so that you know about the speaker before he starts on the session. I hope you guys will enjoy the session and all the very best for you guys. So it's all about the, there are many amendments, circulars, notifications are flowing left and right nowadays. So it is very important for you guys unlearn so many things and relearn and revisit your treasury of the knowledge sector so that you improvise your skill day in day out. So now handing over to Divya, please take over.
Thank you, Sudeep, sir. So welcome everyone to Jnanarjane, hosted by Bengaluru branch of SIRC of ICAI and SICASA Bengaluru. My name is Divya Someshwar and I am a CA student. Today, the SICASA Study Circle Meet is covering the topic of income from house property, and I am really excited to learn. Hope you all are as excited as I am. And I would like to acknowledge the presence of CA Sudeep sir, who is a SICASA co-opted member. And today we have with us an interesting personality who has a specialized knowledge in the field of income tax. And he is currently the partner at BVC and Company, which is a CA firm, completely Bangalore based. And his varied skills in statutory audit, direct tax, indirect tax, financial management. But apart from this, he has a varied interest in playing. He has an amazing interest to play cricket, traveling, and also likes to write stories and also has a passion for reading. I welcome CA Madhukeshwar Hegde, sir. Over to you, sir.
Thank you, Divya. So I hope I am audible.
Yes, sir, you are. And yeah. I'm excited to learn, sir. Over to you.
Thank you. So is my screen visible?
Yes, sir, it is visible.
Yeah. Thank you. Good evening, everyone. I am CA Madhukeshwar Hegde. I hope everyone is fine and safe. And I am immensely excited to present this topic before all of you. And also, I am extremely grateful to SICASA Bangalore for giving me this opportunity. So topic for today's session is income from house property. Before diving directly into the subject, I would like to discuss some basics about the subject. Before going deep into income from house property, I'll explain some introduction as to how income from house property gains so much importance. I'd like to give some advice to the students who are studying. Whenever we study a subject, we should learn it in a common man's perspective. Like you are actually trying to learn something from it, not just to attend exam and complete the subject. It should not be your point of view. You should be able to understand the subject. So let's understand the topics in layman's terms. What is income tax? Income tax is tax on income. It's as simple as that. But do you think it's very simple that any income you earn will be taxed same as others? No. Section 14 of the Income Tax Act 1961 provides that all income shall be classified under the following heads of income. So now we know that any income you earn won't be taxed same as others. Say you earn a salary, or you may earn interest income, or you may earn profit from business. So all these aspects will be taxed differently. Salaries. Salary is any compensation which an employee receives from the employer. It may be monetary compensation or perquisite. So that shall be taxed under the head salaries. Next is income from house property. The income which you earn from house property, which will be understanding in depth in the coming slides. The next head is profits and gains from business or profession. Say if you have a business and if it earns some gains, or if you are in a profession, say chartered accountancy, or if you are a doctor, or if you are a lawyer, any income you earn, that will be taxed under profits and gains from business or profession. And next head is capital gain. Capital gain is quite different from the above three heads, because the above three heads are all regular sources of income. Salary is a regular source of income, and income from house property is a regular source of income, and also profits and gains from business or profession is a regular source of income. Whereas capital gain need not be a regular source of income. When you sell a capital asset, so what is a capital asset? It includes land, building, or shares. It may be short-term capital asset or long-term capital asset. If you sell that and if you earn any gain on that, then it will be taxed under the head capital gains. Okay, a layman might think, okay, now I know what is income tax, and now I have to pay tax on the income, and I should classify my income as these heads. So he earns some particular income and he is not sure under what head he should consider his income. He says if it's salary, no, it's not salary. It's not income from home property. It's not profits or gains from business profession. It's not capital gain. So he thinks, so since it's not covered under any of the heads, so I won't pay any tax. No, my friend, it's not as simple as that. There is another head, which is income from other sources, which absorbs all other incomes which is not covered under the above heads. So income from other sources is the next head of income, which absorbs all other incomes. Now we know all the incomes will be taxed here or there, unless it is covered under the exemptions provided in section 10. Yeah. Let's move on to the next slide now. So heads of income is the topic heads of income is covered now. Section 22, income from house property. So from section 22 to section 27, all the aspects of income from house property are covered. I'll be handling the sessions section wise because it will be easy to remember. So section 22 is a charging section which gives power to the income tax authorities to charge tax on income from house property. Common man might think, okay, I have a house property. I have some income from it. I may earn some income from it in the form of rent. Say 10,000 per month I am earning rent, and it will be 1.2 lakh per year. I'll pay tax on 1.2 lakh. So what's all the fuss this about? No, it's not as simple as that. If it is as simple as that, then we chartered accountants would not have any job to do. The annual value of property shall be chargeable to income tax under the head income from house property. I am reading the first line and last line. So this is how you should understand the language of the act. The annual value of the property shall be chargeable to income tax under the head income from house property. So now I've underlined the word annual value. Why? Because it's not the rent which is charged to tax. It is annual value which is charged to tax. What is annual value? That will be discussed in later slides. So now we understood it's not the simple rent which is charged to tax, but it's annual value of the property which is charged to tax. Next line, consisting of any buildings or lands appurtenant thereto shall be chargeable to income tax under the head income from house property. So what does this mean? Why buildings or lands appurtenant thereto is very important. Property may be anything. but only the annual value of buildings or lands appertaining thereto are covered under income from house property. And here, buildings or lands appertinent thereto. What does lands appertinent thereto mean? Lands belonging thereto. Lands belonging where to? Lands belonging to the building. So every building should have a land belonging to it. So without land, there is no building, unless Mr. Elon Musk builds some houses in the space and lets it on rent. I think those days are also not far away. So as of now, all the buildings are attached to land. So only that land will be covered under income from house property. How does it gain importance? Because if the land is not attached to any building, it is not covered under income from house property. Say there may be situation where there is a vacant land. I have a vacant land and I have let it out for rent for as a ground. And some sporting agency has organized some sporting event and it's giving me rent. So now does it fall under income from house property? No, because there is no land attached, no building attached to that land. You may think, so what different does it make if something is taxed under income from house property or income from other sources? No, it makes very much difference, because deductions under one head are different from deductions under other head. If a vacant land rent is treated under income from house property, I may get a much higher deduction than if I show the same under income from other sources. So it gains very much importance, so as to what are the things which are covered in income from house property. I hope I am clear. So the second line is over now. The annual value of property consists of any buildings or lands appurtenant thereto. And also very interesting fact here. The other day I was discussing with one of my senior partners, and I was amazed to know what are the things which are included as buildings. Buildings, the word building is not defined anywhere in the Act. That means the buildings should be understood in general sense. In one of the case laws, a person had a borewell built. So building is anything which is built. So borewell is built. He built a borewell and he let it out on rent to a person who is supplying water. That person extracted water from that borewell and distributed to people, and he charged some amount. That person gave rent to the person who owned that borewell. Now, does this transaction cover under income from house property? It's a very interesting case law which ruled that that is also covered under building. The borewell is a building because the word building is not defined in the Act. Let us, for our discussion, whenever I say building, we can imagine only the house property for simplicity and better understanding. Okay, so let's set aside the litigations for another day. So whenever I say building, it is house property now. Then the annual value of property consisting of any building or land appurtenant thereto, of which the assessee is the owner. This is again very important. Only if the assessee is the owner of a particular house property, then it is covered under income from house property. So what are the situations in which assessee may not be owner and still he will be earning income from house property? Say, for example, I am residing in a house which is rented. I am residing in a rented house. It has 3 rooms. I don't need 3 rooms. What I'll do, I'll use 2 rooms for my purpose and I'll let out the 3rd room to some other person. Am I the owner of the house property? No, I am not the owner of the house property. There is an original owner who has rented it out to me. I have sublet the one single room to some other person. In this case, any rent I earn will not be covered under income from house property because I am not the owner of the house property. I hope I am clear. So the annual value of property consisting of any building or lands appurtenant thereto, of which the assessee is the owner, shall be chargeable to tax under the head income from house property. So I have left one line there, which is other than such portions of such property as he may occupy for the purposes of any business or profession carried on by him, the profits of which are chargeable to income tax. This I'll cover later because it has a connection with section 23 subsection 2. So I'll come back again later and explain it why. Okay. So the annual value of the property, not the rent, but the annual value, consisting of buildings or lands appurtenant thereto, only buildings or lands appurtenant thereto, not machinery or the vacant land, of which the assessee is the owner, only if the assessee is the owner, not if he is not the owner, shall be chargeable tax under the head income from house property. So section 22 is clear now. Let's move on to the next section. Section 23 is determination of annual value. So section 22 told annual value of the property will be taxed under income from house property. Now section 23 defines annual value. Subsection 1 of section 23 has 3 steps to compute annual value of a house property. Step 1 is compute reasonable expected rent of the property. In the step 1, we should compute reasonable expected rent of the property. And in step 2, we should compute actual rent of the property. And in step 3, we'll compute gross annual value of the property. Now, what is step 1? Step 1 is compute reasonable expected rent of the property. What is reasonable expected rent? Reasonable expected rent will be higher of the following: municipal value of the property or fair rental value of the property. Higher of these two will be reasonable expected rent. But if a property is covered under Rent Control Act, then reasonable expected rent cannot exceed standard rent. So it has a very much importance as to how reasonable expected rent should be computed, because municipal value is a value which we will be learning in the next slide. Municipal value may be one value and fair rental value may be one value. Higher of these will be reasonable expected rent, but that value should not exceed standard rent. So what are these terms? What is a municipal value? For collection of municipal taxes, local tax authorities make periodic survey of all buildings in their jurisdiction. Such value determined by municipal authorities in respect of property is municipal value. So what is municipal value? As all we know, any property which is in the municipal jurisdiction is subjected to property tax. How property tax is levied? It's not an ad hoc amount which we should pay to the government. Municipal authorities will decide what is the annual value of the property, and on that particular percentage is charged as property tax. So municipal authorities will decide one value for the property for the year. So that value is municipal value. That municipal value we should consider in the step 1. And next stage is fair rent. What is fair rent? It is the reasonable expected rent which the property can fetch. It can be determined on the basis of rent fetched by a similar property in the same or similar locality. Fair rent. Fair rent is, in layman's language, what a property might fetch if it is let out or in a similar property in a similar locality. There are 2 house properties in the same locality. For example, one house property is fetching a rent of 1 lakh, and the another house property is fetching the rent of only 80,000. The tax authorities can say, see, the property in that similar locality and which is a similar property which is earning 1 lakh rent, so 1 lakh should be fair rent and not 80,000. So I hope I'm clear about what is fair rent. So it is the reasonable expected rent which the property can fetch. So higher of these two shall be reasonable expected rent. Municipal value which the municipality has decided, and fair rental value which the similar property can fetch in the local area. But it should not exceed standard rent. What is standard rent? It is the maximum rent which a person can legally recover from his tenant under the Rent Control Act. Standard rent is applicable only in case of properties covered under the Rent Control Act. Each state has its own Rent Control Act. For example, Karnataka has the Karnataka Rent Act 1999. In that act, the section 7 of chapter 3 defines standard rent. What is standard rent? This Karnataka Rent Act says standard rent is 10% of the construction value of the property. In Karnataka, if not all the properties are covered under Rent Control Act, that should be kept in mind. Only some of the properties in some of the municipal areas that is provided in the schedule of the Rent Control Act. If some property comes in that area, then rent which an owner collects from the tenant should not exceed some amount. In Karnataka, it's 10% of the construction value of the property. So this is standard rent. So higher of municipal value and fair rental value, but it should not exceed standard rent. We'll understand it better if we solve an example. So in this example, property A, municipal value is 8 lakh. So municipality has decided the value of this property is 8 lakh, but fair rent which the property is fetching, the similar property in similar area is fetching is 2,50,000. Standard rent not applicable because it's not covered under Rent Control Act. So what is the expected reasonable expected rent for step 1? This 8 lakh, higher of fair rent and municipal value. Property B, municipal value is 8 lakh, whereas fair rent is 2,50,000, but standard rent is 85,000. So this property is covered under Rent Control Act, and standard rent which the Act specifies is only 85,000. Higher of municipal value and fair rental value is 8 lakh, but it should be limited to standard rent, that is 85,000. So reasonable expected rent is 85,000 in this case. In third case, property C, municipal value is 8 lakh, fair rent value is 2,50,000, but standard rent is 10 lakh. The Act says the reasonable expected rent should not exceed 10 lakh. It doesn't say it should not be less than standard rent. So it says it should not be less than it should not exceed standard rent, but it doesn't say it should not be more than standard rent. So municipal value is 8 lakh, fair rental value is 2,50,000, standard rent is 10 lakh. In this case, higher of municipal value and fair rental value is 8 lakh. It should be limited to standard rent. Standard rent is anyway higher, so 8 lakh only will be considered as reasonable expected rent. I hope I'm clear in this. So first step is clear now. First step, compute reasonable expected rent of the property. So we have computed reasonable expected rent of the property, considering municipal value, fair rent and standard rent. Now step 2, compute actual rent of the property. Actual rent means the rent for which the property is let out during the year. So it's simple. Any amount of rent which the property fetches is actual rent. While computing actual rent pertaining to vacancy period is not to be deducted. Say property is let out for only 10 months. For 2 months it's vacant. No one has occupied the property. In that case, we cannot deduct the rent pertaining to those 2 months and in this step, but it can be deducted in the next step, which I will be discussing later. So in this step, you cannot deduct rent pertaining to vacancy period. You should consider rent of the whole year. And next line says, however, unrealized rent is to be deducted from the actual rent if conditions specified in this regard are satisfied. What is unrealized rent? So it says actual rent should be actual rent which the property is getting should be considered, and we should not deduct vacancy period rent, but unrealized rent can be deducted. What is unrealized rent then? Unrealized rent is the rent of the property which the owner of the property could not recover from the tenant. That is rent not paid by the tenant. I have let out my property for rent for 12 months. For 11 months, I could recover the rent from the tenant, but for the 12th month, I could not recover the rent. Now, can I take that as a deduction, 1 month's rent, only if the conditions are satisfied? What are the conditions to be satisfied? The tenancy is bona fide. What is bona fide? It should be supported with an agreement. So if the tenancy is bona fide, all these conditions need to be satisfied. The second condition is the defaulting tenant has vacated the property or steps have been taken to compel him to vacate the property. See, 11 months rent he had given, 1 month rent he didn't give, and he continued to do so for the next year also. So the owner has asked him to vacate the property and he has vacated the property, or steps have been taken to compel him to vacate the property. All these things should be done to claim that unrealized rent as deduction. The next condition is the defaulting tenant is not in occupation of any other property of the taxpayer. So if that same tenant is in occupation of some other house property which the owner owns, then we cannot claim it as deduction, because he has vacated some property, but I know where he is because he is in some other property which I own. It should not happen. So defaulting tenant is not in occupation of any other property of the taxpayer. The taxpayer has taken all steps to recover such amount, including legal proceedings, or he satisfies the assessing officer that legal proceedings would be useless. For recovering the 1 month's rent, I have started legal proceedings, or I believe that even though I start the legal proceedings, it would be useless because the tenant will not pay me the rent. If all these conditions are satisfied simultaneously, then I can claim that unrealized rent as deduction. Let me explain with an example. Mr. Raj owns a bungalow throughout the year 21-22. The bungalow is rented to Mr. Kumar at monthly rent of rupees 84,000. Due to internal dispute, Mr. Kumar did not pay rent for the month of March 22. What will be the amount of actual rent to be used to compute gross annual value of the property? Suppose these things happen. Mr. Raj owns a bungalow and he has rented it out to Mr. Kumar for a monthly rent of 84,000. There is an internal dispute. Say Mr. Kumar has a dog of his, and Mr. Raj, when unfortunately when he was upset, scolds the dog. Mr. Kumar becomes furious. Oh my God, did you just scold my dog? How dare you? I won't pay you the March month's rent for the financial year 22. So he might not have told all of this, but you understand the point, right? So there is clearly an internal dispute. Mr. Kumar did not pay rent of the month of March for financial year 22. So what will be the amount of actual rent to be used to compute gross annual value? Answer is 9,24,000. That is 84,000 into 11 months. If all the conditions are satisfied. What are the all conditions? The tenancy should be bona fide. That is, it should be supported by an agreement, and he has vacated the property, Mr. Kumar, or at least the steps. Mr. Raj has taken some steps so that Mr. Kumar would vacate the property, and he is not in occupation of any other house property owned by Mr. Raj, and he has started the legal proceedings, or at least he believes that even if he starts the legal proceedings, Mr. Kumar won't pay him the rent. So if all these conditions are satisfied, I can consider 9,24,000 as my actual rent. Otherwise, if any one of these conditions is not satisfied, then 10,08,000, that is 84,000 into 12, will be considered as my actual rent. Now, so step 1 is reasonable expected rent, that we have computed already. Step 2 is compute actual rent, that is also computed. Now we have to compute gross annual value. What is gross annual value? Gross annual value of a property which is let out throughout the year will be higher amount computed at step 1 or step 2. Step 1 is reasonable expected rent. Step 2 is actual rent. Whichever is higher will be gross annual value. Let's understand this with an example. In case of property A, municipal value is 8,50,000. Fair rent is 2,50,000. Standard rent is not applicable. Actual rent is 9,60,000 for the entire year, and unrealized rent is 1,60,000. Let's discuss step by step. So computation of reasonable expected rent. Reasonable expected rent, we all know, is higher of municipal or fair rental value and limited to standard rent. 8,50,000 or 2,50,000, higher is to 8,50,000. Standard rent is not applicable, so 8,50,000 is the answer for property A. Whereas for property B, 8,50,000, higher of 8,50,000 and 2,50,000 is 8,50,000. However, standard rent is only 85,000, so amount at step 2 would be 85,000. For property C, higher of those two is 8,50,000, but standard rent is anyway higher, so that doesn't affect my amount in step 1. So 8,50,000 would be amount at step 1. Now, step 2, computation of actual rent. Actual rent for the entire year is 9,60,000. So we have to deduct unrealized rent. What is the assumption I am making? He has satisfied all those conditions. So I am assuming he has satisfied all those conditions. So I am deducting unrealized rent, and amount at step 2 will be 8 lakh. And actual rent for property B is only 60,000. There is no unrealized rent. The rent itself is very low. Amount at step 2 will be 60,000. Actual rent for the entire year for the property C is 9,60,000. Unrealized rent is 80,000. 9,60,000 minus 80,000, that is amount at step 2 would be 8,80,000. So this brings us to computation of gross annual value, which is step 3. Amount at step 1 is 8,50,000. Amount at step 2 is 8 lakh. And what should be considered as gross annual value? Whichever is higher, that is 8,50,000. See, you have to make an interesting point here. Even though I have received, what is amount at step 2? Actual rent received. Even though I have received only 8 lakh rent during the year, what is the gross annual value of the property? 8,50,000, not the actual rent received. As I told, it's not as simple as the rent received is the annual value. Even though rent received is less, 8,50,000 would become gross annual value. In second case, whichever is higher is 85,000, so that is the gross annual value. And in case of property C, the rent I actually received is greater than the expected rent, so that would become the gross annual value. So is this the amount on which I am paying tax? No. What does section 22 say? The annual value of the property. Is this the annual value? No, it is gross annual value. Gross annual value is different from annual value. What is annual value? We'll learn that in the later slides. So proviso. Proviso, first proviso and only proviso to section 23 subsection 1. Provided that the taxes levied by any local authority in respect of the property shall be deducted in determining the annual value of the property of that previous year in which such taxes are actually paid by him, irrespective of the previous year in which the liability to pay such taxes was incurred by the owner. So now what does it mean? I've underlined the word actually paid by him. The taxes, so we know municipal authorities will fix a value for the property, and on that property we should pay property tax. Income Tax Act allows us to take that property tax as deduction. So what are the conditions to be satisfied? It should be actually paid by him. It should be actually paid, and it should be paid by him. What does actually paid mean? Irrespective of the year in which the liability to pay such taxes was incurred by the owner. Even though it relates to say financial year 15-16 or 16-17, I have not paid it that year, but I have paid it during the current year 21-22. I can claim it in current year. I cannot claim as and when the liability arises. Suppose for 21-22, I have not paid the property tax, but it is due. I cannot claim it as deduction because it's not actually paid by me. And also the next word, him, actually paid by him. He should be paying, the owner should be paying the property tax. If someone else, say tenant, he asks the tenant to pay the property tax, can he claim the amount as deduction? No. The act specifically says the taxes are actually paid by him. Only if the owner takes the onus and pays the tax, then he can claim it as deduction. Not if someone else pays it on his behalf. I hope I'm clear now. So let's move on to next slide. Computation of gross annual value in case of vacancy. So as I told, in the second step, it says while computing actual rent pertaining to vacancy period is not to be deducted. So in step 2, it cannot be deducted. Where it should be deducted? Now it says the explanation to section 23 subsection 1. Computation of gross annual value in case of vacancy. So when there is vacancy, where the property or any part of the property is let and was vacant during the whole or any part of the previous year, owing to such vacancy, the actual rent received or receivable by the owner in respect thereof is less than reasonable expected rent, then the actual rent shall be considered to be the gross annual value of the property. Let's assimilate what it actually means. Where the property or any part of the property is let. So I have let out my property and was vacant during the whole or any part of the previous year. So it is vacant. say for example, the current situation due to COVID-19, people have gone to their native places. Because of that, the properties are vacant. Say for first 6 months, someone has occupied the property, and for the next 6 months, it is vacant. Step 2 for computing the gross annual value says vacancy period rent cannot be deducted. But it's not fair to the taxpayer because he himself has not received any rent during that period. Then how it is fair to collect tax on the same which he has not actually received? So this comes to our rescue. What does it say? If it is let and was vacant during the whole or any part of the previous year, and owing to such vacancy, because of that vacancy, the actual rent received or receivable by the owner in respect of the ROF is less than reasonable expected rent. So in this example, if we see, say, let's take property C for example. Amount at step 1, that is expected rent is 8,50,000. Amount at step 2, that is 8,80,000. In this step, we have not deducted rent related to vacant period because the act specifically says it should not be deducted. So I have not deducted. Now, actually for 2 months, it's vacant. Say 40,000, 40,000, 80,000, I have not received. But I have considered it in step 2 because the act specifically says so. 8,80,000 is the rent for the whole year, but 80,000 I have not received because it's vacant. Now what happens? Expected rent is 8,50,000. Amount at step 2 is 8,80,000, but because of vacancy, it became 8 lakh. Correct? Now, because of vacancy, the actual rent is less than expected rent. I hope you are understanding. Expected rent is 8,50,000. Amount at step 2 is 8,80,000, but because of vacancy, 80,000 I not received, it becomes 8 lakh. So, owing to such vacancy, my actual rent is less than expected rent. So, in that case, I can take actual rent as the gross annual value of the property. Say 8 lakh as the gross annual value of the property in that step, even though it is less than expected rent. Say in property A, reasonable expected rent is 8,50,000, but actual rent is 8 lakh, and I have received all of the 12 installments of the rent. But still it is less than the expected rent. In that case, I cannot take 8 lakh because actual rent is not less than expected rent because of vacancy, but it is less because the rent itself is less. I hope you are understanding. So in case of property C, if because of vacancy my actual rent becomes 8 lakh, then actual rent only will be considered as gross annual value, not the higher of these two. So where the property or any part of the property is let and was vacant during the whole or any part of the previous year, owing to such vacancy, because of that vacancy, the actual rent received or receivable by the owner in respect thereof is less than reasonable expected rent. So the section 23 says higher of reasonable expected rent or actual rent. Actual rent is higher, but if I reduce rent relating to vacancy period, it will become less than expected rent. In that case, because of vacancy, if the actual rent is less, then the actual rent shall be considered to be the gross annual value of the property. I hope I'm clear in this. Then section 23 subsection 2, where the property consists of a house or part of house which is in the occupation of the owner for the purpose of his own residence, or cannot actually be occupied by the owner by reason of the fact that owing to his employment, business or profession carried on at any other place, he has to reside at the other place in the building not belonging to him. The annual value of such house or part of the house shall be taken to be nil. So this is very interesting because in all the previous sections, what does it tell? Annual value of the property, which consists of building or lands appertaining thereto, owned by such assessee, will be taxed under income from house property. While computing, first step is expected rent. All the properties will have expected rent, no matter whether it is rented or not. So just because I am staying in the house, it doesn't mean it doesn't have any expected rent. It has expected rent. Municipal authorities will anyway determine its value, and there is a fair rental value because similar property is let out during the year. So there is annual expected rent, but actual rent received is nil. Actual rent received is nil because I am occupying the house. So what will be the annual value? Higher of expected rent and actual rent, which is expected rent. So technically, even though I own a property, I would be paying tax on the annual property, even though I have not let it on rent. I hope I'm clear. That would be the problem if this section was not there. I own a property and I have not let it for rent. I am staying at that in that house for my residence, my own purpose. In that case, anyhow, the section 22 and 23 applies. It says annual value of the property. Annual value is higher of expected rent and actual rent. Actual rent is nil. That nil can be considered only when it is vacant. According to this explanation, only if it is vacant, then actual rent can be considered. But in this case, I am occupying the property. It's not vacant. So the actual rent is not less because it's vacant, because I am occupying it. In that case, expected rent would be gross annual value of the property. So technically everyone in the country who is owning a property should be paying tax on that. So this section comes to our rescue. What does it say? Where the property consists of house or part of house, which is in the occupation of the owner for the purpose of his own residence. If I am staying in my house, or I cannot stay because I have occupation elsewhere, then the annual value of such property shall be taken to be nil. Now let's go back to the first slide where I had skipped here. What does it say? The annual value of property consists of building and lands appertaining thereto, of which the assessee is the owner, other than such portions of such property as he may occupy for the purposes of any business or profession carried on by him, the profits of which are chargeable to income tax, shall be chargeable to income tax under the head income from house property. So now the annual value of property, if it is let out, then annual value of the house property will be determined according to the next steps. If it is self-owned, then the annual value will be nil according to section 23 subsection 2. What if it's not let out also, and I also not residing in the place? I am carrying on some business or profession in that place. In that case, this section comes to my rescue. So if I have let out anyway, I have to pay tax on the rent I received or annual value of the property. If I own the property and I myself is residing in that property, then section 23 subsection 2 comes to my rescue and it says annual value will be nil. So I won't be paying tax. What if I am not staying in the house and I am not let out also, but I am carrying on business in that premise? Then also it will be nil because the annual value of property other than such portions of such property as he may occupy for the purpose of any business or profession carried on by him. It specifically says the annual value of property other than properties. If it is used for carrying on of business, then it won't be considered as income from house property. There's a simple logic in this. If I am carrying on the business in my own house property, I would not be paying rent. If I was carrying on my business in some other property, I would have paid rent and claimed that as deduction. Suppose 10 lakh is my business income and 2 lakh is the rent. If I am carrying on the business in my own house property, then I would not be paying rent and I would show 10 lakh as my business income. If I were to run the business in some other property, 10 lakh business income and less 2 lakh rent I should pay. So only 8 lakh I would have shown as income from house property. That's why if I carry on the business in my own house property, that will not be covered under income from house properties. Now let's jump into next section. Section 23(2) says, so if you own a house property and if you are staying in it, then you need not calculate annual value of the property. But it's not as simple as that. Section 23(3) says provisions of subsection 2 shall not apply if the house or part of the house is actually let during the whole or any part of the year. So we should appreciate the lawmakers in this regard, because see, section 23(2) says if any house property is in the occupation of the owner, then annual value will be nil. What people started doing? They owned the house property, they were also staying in the house property, and part of the house they used to let it out to other people. So section 23(2) says if you are in the occupation of the house property, then annual property will be nil. Then those people said, I am in the occupation of the house property, so even though I have let it on rent some of the part, the annual value should be nil. No, section 23(3) says provisions of subsection 2 shall not apply. That is, if you are in the occupation of your own house, gross annual value will be nil. That is not applicable if the house or part of house is actually let during the whole or any part of the year, or any other benefit therefrom is derived by the owner. I am owning the property. I am letting some of the part of the property as rent. I am receiving some amount or some other benefit from the tenant. Then that will be considered. That should be the annual value of that should be considered accordingly. Now, the section 23, subsection 4, where the property referred to in subsection 2 consists of more than 2 houses. Where the property referred to in subsection 2. What is the property referred to in subsection 2? The own house property owned by myself. Where the property referred to in subsection 2 consists of more than 2 houses, the provisions of that section shall apply only in respect of 2 houses which the assessee may at his option specify in this behalf. So we know now, if I let out any property for rent, I'll have to pay taxes. If I myself occupy the property, then annual value shall be nil. But 23(4) says annual value will be nil only for 2 houses. If you own 3 houses, then only for 2 houses this benefit is applicable. The annual value of the house or houses other than the house or houses in respect of which the assessee has exercised the option under clause A shall be determined under subsection 1 as if such house or houses had been let. I hope you are able to understand all this interplay between the sections. 23(2) says if you own a house property and if you are residing in it, then annual value will be nil. Section 23(3) says if you actually let out some property, then you should pay tax on that. Section 23(4) says it doesn't mean you can own any number of property as you want. Only for 2 house properties you can exercise that benefit. For any property other than those 2 house properties for which you have exercised the option, for those house properties, annual value will be computed as per section 23, subsection 1. How? Expected rent should be calculated. Expected rent should anyway be there because municipal value will anyway be there. Then expected rent you will arrive at in step 1. In step 2 you will arrive at actual rent. Actual rent is nil because you are not actually let out, you are only using higher of those 2, that is expected rent. You should pay tax on expected rent even though you are not receiving any rent. I hope I'm clear now. Even though you have not earned any income, if you own 3 house properties, then on 1 house property at your choice, say you own house property in various areas, 2 in Bangalore and 1 in your native place where the expected rent is low. Income tax doesn't ask you to show the property in Bangalore as let out house property. You can exercise this option on any house because expected rent in native or rural places is very low. So you can show that also as deemed let out house property and pay tax on lesser income. So it doesn't specify which house property should show as deemed let out. So if you own more than 2 house properties, the house property other than 2 on your choice will be treated as deemed let out and annual value will be calculated for those houses. So combination of subsections 2 and 3 and 4 would look like this. If you own only 1 house property that is self-occupied, then annual value will be nil. Which plays its part? Section 23 subsection 2. Number of houses owned is 1 and that is let out. Then if you have actually let out, then annual value to be calculated as per subsection 1, expected rent or annual rent, whichever is higher, that should be considered as gross annual value. Then 2, both self-occupied. If both of the houses are self-occupied, then also the annual value will be nil. You have two house properties, one you have self-occupied and one you have let out. For self-occupied house property, the annual value will be nil, gross annual value will be nil, and for the let out house property, you should compute as per subsection 1. If you own 3 house properties and all are self-occupied, in this case, nil for any 2 self-occupied house properties of your choice, and annual value to be calculated for the other house property as per subsection 1. And the other situation where you have 3 house properties, 2 self-occupied and 1 let out. Now you can't choose which house property you should show as annual value, because already you have let out, and if you have already actually let out, you should compute gross annual value on the basis of that. Fine. Now, section 23, subsection 5, where the property consisting of any land or any building or land appendant thereto is held as stock in trade, and the property or any part of the property is not let during whole or any part of the previous year, the annual value of such property or part of the property of the period up to 2 years from the end of the financial year in which the certificate of completion of construction of property is obtained shall be taken to be nil. Let's understand this from practical perspective. Section 23 subsection 4 says you can show the annual value of house property as nil only for 2 houses. That is clear now. What is the case? What is the situation of a real estate dealer or a constructor who has more than 2 house properties? Say he has 10 house properties in his name which are yet to be sold. So they are his stock in trade. He deals in that. So in that case, if you apply section 23 subsection 4, so apart from 2 houses, you should calculate annual value for all the other houses and you should pay tax on that. Now the section 23 subsection 5 plays its part. It says that the property consisting of any building or land appended thereto is held as stock in trade. That means he has a real estate dealer or he is a constructor, and he has house property in large numbers, and the property or any part of the property is not let out. If it is let out, then anyhow you have to calculate annual value. The annual value of such property or part of the property for the period up to 2 years. Income tax gives only 2 years time for you to sell the property. If you cannot sell the property in 2 years after the certificate of completion of construction of the property is obtained, then it will be taxed. Up to 2 years, it will be taken to be nil. So once the property is completed, up to 2 years, you can take the benefit of this section. So you can show nil as income from house property. After the 2nd year, then you should calculate annual value for all of the house properties and pay tax on that. So this is relating to the house property or that's building or land appendant thereto held as stock in trade. Now, section 24. Section 23 deals with computation of gross annual value. But gross annual value is not taxed. Annual value is taxed. What is annual value? Gross annual value less some deductions. So what are the deductions that you can claim from gross annual value? Section 24 deals with deductions from income from house property. The first deduction that you can claim is a sum equal to 30% of the annual value. 30% of the gross annual value rather. So what is the gross annual value which you have already computed in step as per section 23 subsection 1 less the property tax which you already paid. So property tax you can claim as deduction under first proviso of section 23 subsection 1. So that deduction you can claim. Now under section 24 subsection A, a sum equal to 30% of the annual value you can claim as deduction. So why this deduction is given? You cannot claim any deduction like repairs to the house or any you might have painted the house. Those deductions you can't claim. Instead of that, you can claim an ad hoc deduction of 30% on the annual value. You can't claim the actual deduction, even though you are not incurred any expense, you can claim this 30% of deduction. The second deduction is where the property has been acquired, constructed, repaired, renewed, or reconstructed with borrowed capital. The amount of any interest payable on such capital you can claim as deduction. You might have taken loan for acquisition of house property or construction of the house property, or even for repair or renewal of the house property. In that case, if you are paying interest on the borrowed capital, of course you are paying interest on the borrowed capital, that interest you can claim as deduction from income from house property, this gross annual value. Now, conditions for claiming interest deduction for self-occupied house property. For let out house property, there are no such conditions. However, for claiming interest deduction for self-occupied house property, there are some conditions. Second proviso to section 24B. Loan should have been borrowed after first day of April 1999. Before that, only 30,000 used to be the deduction. So after this date, 2 lakh is the deduction. So loan should have been borrowed after first day of April 1999. And second point, acquisition or construction is completed within 5 years from the end of the financial year in which capital was borrowed. This should be kept in mind, and the amount of deduction shall not exceed 2 lakh. The amount of deduction which you can claim for self-occupied house property is 2 lakh. So gross annual value of the self-occupied house property is nil by virtue of section 23 subsection 2, because you only are residing in the place, or you cannot reside in that place because you have occupation elsewhere. In that case, the gross annual value will be taken as nil, but you can claim 2 lakh deduction in that from self-occupied house property. So what are the deductions? 30% of the annual value is the first deduction, and interest paid you can claim as deduction. But in case of self-occupied house property, only 2 lakh you can claim as deduction. Next, pre-construction period interest. What is pre-construction period interest? You might have borrowed a loan. You might have taken a loan from a financial institution and you might have handed it over to the builder. Is it necessary that as soon as the loan is sanctioned and you hand over the loan amount to the builder, he gives you the house property? No, he obviously takes time to construct the house property. That is pre-construction period. In that period, you however have to repay the loan. In that loan, there is a principal and there is interest portion. For some years, it may be a moratorium period, but of course, after the moratorium period is ended, you have to pay principal as well as interest. So interest pertaining to pre-construction period is allowed as deduction in 5 equal installments commencing from the year in which the house property is acquired or constructed. So just because you have taken the loan for the purpose of building the house, you cannot claim it as and when you pay the interest. Only when the house property is constructed or the house property is acquired from the builder, from that year, you can claim 1/5 of the total interest which you have paid during the pre-construction period, not the whole amount which you have paid as interest during the pre-construction period. In 5 installments, you should claim the interest relating to pre-construction period. So that pre-construction period interest you can claim as deduction from annual house property, gross annual value. Now section 25. What is section 25? Interest shall not be deducted under section 24 if interest is payable outside India on which tax has not been paid or deducted under chapter 17B. Chapter 17B is chapter 17B deals with TDS. So if any interest is paid outside India, section 195 will be applicable. Interest paid to revenue paid to non-resident. If TDS is not deducted on the interest payable outside India, then you cannot claim interest as deduction. What if the interest is paid inside India? Then it doesn't matter. So even if you do not deduct TDS, you can claim deduction. Only if interest is payable outside India, on which tax has not been paid or deducted, then you cannot claim interest as deduction. So that is section 25. Now, section 25A, taxation of unrealized rent received subsequently. So I hope you remember example which I discussed, Mr. Raj had let out property to Mr. Kumar and he denied to pay the last month rent. Now, after 10 years, he realizes that it was a very silly matter for which I withheld the rent, so I have to pay him the rent. What happens then? Unrealized rent is not taxed, you remember. Unrealized rent is deducted from gross annual value and only the remaining amount is taxed. Now, that unrealized rent is recovered from the tenant subsequently. Unrealized rent realized subsequently from a tenant shall be deemed to be the income from house property in respect of the financial year in which the rent is received or realized. Say after 10 years, if that person who refused to pay you the rent during the period of crisis pays you the rent after 10 years, then in that year you have to show it as income from house property, no matter if you own the property or not. Even if you don't own the house property, or even if you don't have any other sources of income, unrealized rent is recovered from the tenant. In that year, you should show it as income from house property. But wait, a sum equal to 30% of the arrears of rent or the unrealized rent shall be allowed as deduction. Had I shown that unrealized rent as income in the year in which it was due, I would have claimed 30% of deduction, correct? Because section 24 subsection A says 30% of gross annual value. That unrealized rent would have been included in the gross annual value. Just because I have deducted there and I am showing the rent during the year of receipt, I cannot. The income tax authorities cannot say you can't claim that 30% deduction. So a sum equal to 30% of arrears or rent unrealized can be taken as deduction. Suppose that 84,000. Say on 84,000 which you receive in the after 10 years. So you should show 84,000 as gross annual value. From that 30% you can claim as deduction and only the remaining portion you can show as annual value of the house property. Now, property section 26 is about property owned by co-owners. What happens if property is owned by co-owners? In most of the cases, the property is not purchased by a single individual. Say husband and wife might borrow the loan and own the house property in joint names. So where property is owned by two or more persons and the respective shares are definite and ascertainable. In the agreement, it specifically says 50% of the property is owned by one person and 50% of property is owned by another person. No need to be 50%. Any amount of share is definite and ascertainable. Such persons shall not, in respect of such property, be assessed as an association of persons. If they were to be taxable as association of persons, it would be a separate entity, because as individual or company or partnership firm, association of person is also one type of assessee. So if any property is owned by two or more persons, it will not be taxed as association of persons, but the share of each such person in the income from the property as computed in accordance with sections 22 to 25 shall be included in his total income. That means when two or more persons own the house property and the shares are definite and ascertainable, each one of them will have to show their share of rent, and each one of them can claim 30% of deduction, and each one of them can claim the interest which is his share. So separately, the rent, the annual value will be determined, not as association of persons. This is section 26. Now, section 27, deemed owner. Section 22 said annual value of the house property, annual value of the property, which includes land, building or land appurtenant thereto, of which the assessee is the owner. Correct? Only that property would come under income from house property. Now, section 27 says, even if you don't own the house property, you will become owner. Even if I am not the owner of the house property, I would have to show the income in my name only. In what are those cases? First one is an individual who transfers otherwise than for adequate consideration any house property to his or her spouse, not being a transfer in connection with an agreement to live apart, or to a minor child, not being married daughter, shall be deemed to be the owner of the house property, so transferred. An individual who transfers otherwise than for adequate consideration, that means he transfers the ownership of the property, but he doesn't receive adequate consideration, or he doesn't receive any consideration for that matter. He transfers it to his spouse or his minor child. Then the income which is being earned by that property would be taxable in the hands of the person who has transferred, because it's he has transferred only because he has an intention to evade tax. How he will evade tax? So he might be in the 30% bracket. If he had to show the rental income, he has to pay 30% tax on that, whereas his spouse might not be having any income. So if she shows that income, she would be able to get 2,50,000 basic exemption, and if the rent is less than 5 lakh, she would not pay any tax only. So because of that, he might have transferred it for inadequate consideration. So if an individual transfers otherwise than for adequate consideration any house property to his spouse, but if he transfers the property to his spouse in connection with agreement to live apart, then it doesn't matter. So only spouse only will be taxed. But if it is not in connection with the agreement to live apart, then if he transfers the house property less than for less than adequate consideration, then the individual will be treated as deemed owner and it will be taxed in his hands. Or to a minor child, if he transfers it to a minor child, not being a married daughter. This is interesting now. So if you transfer any house property to a minor child, then you have to pay tax on the income. But if the minor child is a married daughter, then you do not pay tax. You can ask how a minor child can be married. So Income Tax Act is not for avoiding crimes. It is for taxing the people. Even if you earn an income from theft, or even if your income is black money, you need to pay tax on that. If that crime, your source is crime or not, it's up to the other laws, not the income tax. Even though you have earned that income from source which is not legal, Income Tax Act says, okay, you pay the tax. So here, if that minor child is married daughter, then married daughter will be the assessee, not the person who has transferred. So in this case, the person who has transferred the property for other than for adequate consideration shall be treated as deemed owner. So I hope I am clear in this. Next, deemed owner, the holder of an impartible estate shall be deemed to be the individual owner of all the properties comprised in the estate. Say there is an estate, it is impartible. You can't, impart them. You can't divide them. So only the administrative matters are transferred to different people. In that case, who is the ultimate owner he only shall be deemed to be the owner of the property. So transferred. Next is deemed owner in case of cooperative society. A member of a cooperative society, company, or other association of persons to whom a building or part thereof is allotted or leased under a house building scheme of the society, company, or association, as the case may be, shall be deemed to be the owner of that building or part thereof. There are cases where the buildings are allotted to cooperative societies. Say there is an apartment and that is in the name of a cooperative society. All the buildings are in the name of the cooperative society and each house is given to its members. In this case, cooperative society will not be the owner. Who will be the owner? To whom the building or part thereof is allotted or leased under a house building scheme of society, company, or association, as the case may be, shall be deemed to be the owner of that building or part thereof. I hope it's clear now. Next. Who is another deemed owner? In case of lease of a property for a period not less than 12 years, lessee is deemed to be the owner of the property. What is the lease agreement? Lease agreement is for you won't be paying rent regularly. You will pay lease as a whole for certain number of years. So in case if the lease period is more than 12 years, or that means not less than 12 years, that is 12 years or more, then lessee is deemed to be the owner of the property. However, any right by way of lease from month to month or a period of not exceeding 1 year is not covered by this provision. If you have leased a property more than 12 years, but you are paying him month to month rent or yearly rent, then this provision is not applicable. Even though it is more than 12 years, you will not be the owner. If it is more than 12 years and you have paid the rent, lease amount at one shot, then lessee is deemed to be the owner of the property. So these are all the provisions of deemed owner. First is if you transfer your house property without adequate consideration just to evade tax, then you only will be the deemed owner. And if you are a holder of an impartible asset, then you will be the owner. Then if you are a member of a cooperative society owns a apartment and it allots you some of the houses, even though the whole building is owned by cooperative society, you will be treated as the owner of the part of the building which is allotted to you. And in case of lease more than 12 years, you will be treated as the deemed owner of the property. So this is computation of income from house property. After all these provisions, now we have come to the computation of income from house property. Annual value should be computed now. Excuse me. So first step is gross annual value. How gross annual value is arrived at, we already know. Higher of expected rent or actual rent, limited to standard rent, and then we arrive at actual rent. Higher of those two is gross annual value. From that, we have to deduct municipal taxes paid during the year. That after deducting municipal taxes paid during the year from gross annual value, we will arrive at net annual value. Then we have to deduct 24A deductions. What are 24A deductions? One is 30% of NAV, and next one is deduction under 24B on account of interest on borrowed capital. Income from house property will be the net of all these deductions. Now let's understand this provision with an example. Gross annual value for the illustration one is 12 lakh. Gross annual value, I think you understand what is gross annual value, higher of expected rent or actual rent. Then property tax is 50,000 due during the year but not paid. The interest and loan is 3 lakh in first illustration. In second illustration, 6 lakh is the gross annual value. Property tax is 50,000 related to prior years but paid during the year, and interest and loan is 4 lakh. Gross annual value in case of illustration 3 is nil. Why it is nil? Because it is self-occupied. By virtue of section 23 subsection 2, gross annual value of any self-occupied house property up to 2 house properties is nil only. So property tax in this case is 50,000 and interest on loan is 4 lakh. Gross annual value in case of illustration 4, it's actually a self-occupied house property. There are 3 house properties which a person owns, and third house property has an expected rent of 4 lakh. So in this case, third house property will be deemed to be let out house property. So expected rent we should consider as gross annual value. And property tax in that case is 50,000. Interest and loan is 3 lakh. Now, let's compute the answer. In first case, 12 lakh gross annual value less municipal taxes nil. Why municipal taxes is nil? Because it's not paid during the year. Due during the year but not paid. So we cannot claim that as deduction. Then we arrive at NAV, that is 12 lakh. Then we have to deduct 30% of NAV, 3,60,000, and we have to deduct interest on borrowed capital, that is 3 lakh, and income from house property will be 5,40,000 in the case of illustration 1. In case of illustration 2, 6 lakh is the gross annual value. I will deduct 50,000 as municipal taxes, and 5,50,000 will be my net annual value. From that net annual value, I'll deduct 30% of NAV and interest on borrowed capital of 4 lakh. That comes to 15,000 loss. So I have made loss in this case. Illustration 3, gross annual value will be nil because it's a self-occupied house property. Even though I have paid 50,000 property tax, I cannot claim deduction of property tax in case of self-occupied house property, and NAV will be nil. And deduction under section 24 is 30% of net annual value, that is nil only, and interest on borrowed capital, that is limited to 2 lakh. Why? As per second proviso to section 24B. Section 24B clearly says if it is a self-occupied house property, you can claim the deduction of interest only up to 2 lakh. So income from house property will be 2 lakh loss. So I can set it off against any other income. The set of rules also we will be discussing later. Illustration 4, gross annual value is 4 lakh. It's actually a self-occupied house property, but since I own more than 2 house properties, the annual value of the third property will be considered as gross annual value since it is deemed let out house property. I can take the deduction of municipal taxes also, 30% deduction also will be available, and interest on borrowed capital also I can claim. Fine. Now, intra-head set-off of losses. What is intra-head set-off of losses? Inter-head set-off, there are 5 heads as we know. Intra-head is within the head, within the house property. Within house property, there are two or three house properties may be there. So among them only the provisions of set-off. Intra-head set-off of losses. Section 70 deals with intra-head set-off of losses. What does section 70 say? Where the net result of for any assessment year in respect of any source falling under any head of income other than capital gains is a loss, the assessee shall be entitled to have the amount of such loss set off against his income from any other source under the same head. What is the same head? Say in our case, income from house property. If I have 2 or more sources under the same head, say I have 3 houses, from one house I am earning profit, from another house I am earning loss. So I am entitled to have the amount of such loss set off against his income from any other source under the same head. So there is no limit prescribed under this head, under this section, as it's clearly seen. Section 70 does not impose any limit. If 8 lakh is the income from one house property and 7 lakh is lost from another house property, I can set off 7 lakh with 8 lakh income and I can show 1 lakh as my actual income from house property. Next head, next section, section 71 subsection 3A. What is section 71 subsection 3A? Section 71 subsection 3A says that in respect of any assessment year, the net result of the computation under the head income from house property is a loss, and the assessee has income assessable under any other head of income, the assessee shall not be entitled to set off such loss to the extent the amount of the loss exceeds 2 lakh rupees against the income under the other head. Section 70 deals with intra-head set-off, whereas section 71 3A deals with inter-head set-off, inter-head with other heads of income. What does it say? Where in respect of any assessment year, the net result of the computation under the head income from house property is a loss. So I have made intra-head adjustments, but still there is a loss. Say some 5 lakh loss is there from income from house property. The assessee has income accessible under any other head of income. What are the other heads of income? Maybe salary or business or profession. Let's say business or profession. And the assessee has income accessible under any other head of income. Say I have 5 lakh loss from house property. I have 10 lakh income from business. The assessee shall not be entitled to set off such loss to the extent the amount of such loss exceeds 2 lakh rupees. Only that means only up to 2 lakh rupees I can set off. From 10 lakh, even though my loss from house property is 5 lakh, I can claim only 2 lakh as deduction by virtue of section 71 subsection 3A. So do you think the rest 3 lakh is lost? No. What takes care of the rest 3 lakh? Section 71B. If loss from house property cannot be wholly set off against any other head of income, the loss shall be carried forward to the following assessment year, not being more than 8 assessment years immediately succeeding the assessment year for which the loss was first computed. So if we cannot set off whole of the loss from house property. Say in our example, 5 lakh was the loss, only 2 lakh was set off against income from business. The rest 3 lakh shall be carried forward to the following assessment year, but not being more than 8 assessment years. Only up to 8 assessment years I can carry forward the loss. Each year 2 lakh I can claim as deduction under 2 lakh I can claim as deduction under income from house property. So example, if we discuss illustration 1, in interest on loan for self-occupied house property. So interest on loan for self-occupied house property is 4 lakh. Income from let out house property 1 is 2 lakh, and income from let out house property 2 is negative 5 lakh, that is loss, and business income is 4 lakh. In this case, what happens? Income from self-occupied house property will be negative 2 lakh, even though interest paid on loan on self-occupied house property is 4 lakh by virtue of proviso 2 to section 24B. Only 2 lakh I can claim as loss from self-occupied house property, 2 lakh self-occupied house property loss, 2 lakh self-occupied house, let out house property income, and let out house property 2 loss of 5 lakh. So total house property income is negative 5 lakh. So this positive 2 lakh will be set off with negative 2 lakh, and negative 5 lakh will be my loss from house property. Business income is 4 lakh. Can I set off whole 4 lakh with the loss? No. Only 2 lakh I can claim as set off. So loss from house property is to be set off is only 2 lakh, and total income would be 4 lakh business income minus 2 lakh set off, that is 2 lakh will be the total income. Carried forward house property loss will be 3 lakh, and it will be carried forward for 8 years. In illustration 2, income from let out house property 1 is 4 lakh, and income from let out house property 2 is 6 lakh, and total house property income became 2 lakh. Is there a limit under intra-head set off? No. For inter-head set off, there is 2 lakh limit. For intra-head set off, there is no limit. So whole 4 lakh can be set off against 6 lakh income. So only 2 lakh house property income I can show. And business income is 4 lakh and total income is 6 lakh. Now, in example 3 lakh is loss from one house property and 3 lakh is loss from another house property. Total loss is 6 lakh. Now the total, so business income is 4 lakh. I cannot set off whole 4 lakh against the loss of house property. Only 2 lakh I can set off, and 2 lakh I have shown as total income, and I will carry forward the rest 4 lakh to next assessment year, and it will be carried forward until 8 assessment years. Yes, this is all about set off and carry forward. Now, section 80EEA. How section 80EEA come into picture in case of income from house property? As we know, in case under section 24 subsection B, we can claim interest paid on borrowed capital as deduction. How much deduction we can claim? For let out house property, any amount of deduction we can claim. For self-occupied house property, by virtue of second proviso, only up to 2 lakh we can claim. But with an objective to provide an impetus to the housing for all initiative of the government and to enable the home buyer to have low cost funds at his disposal, Finance Act number 2, 2019 has inserted a new section 80EEA under the Income Tax Act. What does 80EEA tell? An individual can claim deduction of up to rupees 1,50,000 under section 80EEA subject to following conditions. Loan should be sanctioned by the financial institution during the period beginning from 1/4/2019 to 31/3/2022. Between these two periods, the loan must have been sanctioned. Stamp duty of the residential house property should not exceed 45 lakhs. If the stamp duty of the house property is not more than 45 lakhs, and the assessee should not own any other house property on the date of sanction of loan. This is his first property and he does not have any other house property. If all these conditions are satisfied, he can claim 1,50,000 under 80EEA. There was another section 80EE which was before this section. If that is for the loan sanction from 2017 to 2019. If he cannot claim that section, he can claim 80EEA up to 1,50,000. It is interesting to note that this is in addition to 2 lakh which we claim under 24B. However, for let out house property, we can claim whole of the interest under 24B only. But for self-occupied house property, we can claim only up to 2 lakh in section 24B, and we can claim 1,50,000 under this section 80EEA. Provided all these conditions are satisfied. What are the conditions to be satisfied in this regard? The loan should be sanctioned between 1/4/2019 and 31/3/2022, and stamp duty value of a residential house property is not more than 45 lakhs, and the assessee should not own the residential house property on that date of sanction. He does not own any other house property on that date. So in that case, he can claim additional 1,50,000. Yeah. So now let us. So I've covered most of the provisions dealing with income from house property. So let us move on to frequently asked questions now. The first question: how is rental income from subletting treated? What is subletting? That we already discussed through an example. I am a person who is residing in a place. It has 3 rooms, and 2 rooms I am only occupying, and the other room I have let it on rent. That is called rental income from subletting. So how it is treated? It is income from other sources. Why it is not income from house property? Because the main impetus of the section is you should be the owner, or at least the deemed owner. If you are not neither owner nor deemed owner, then the income which you earn will not be treated under income from house property, but it will be treated as income from other sources. Now we may think, what difference does it make if I show that income as income from rental, income from house property or income from other sources? There is a difference. Under income from house property, we can claim 30% of ad hoc deduction. If you show that income as income from house property, you can claim 30% of ad hoc deduction, even though you have not claimed any, you have not incurred any expenses. But if you show it as income from other sources, you cannot claim that 30% deduction. You have to show all the income from rent less any expenses directly related to that. That means only some minimal amount will be there. So technically, you are showing whole rent which you have received from subletting the house property. You would be showing as income, and you would be paying tax on that. But if you have shown that income as income from house property, direct 30% deduction you have got. So that makes a huge difference in computing the tax on total income. Next question: how is rental income from a shop treated? What does section 22 say? The annual value of property, including which includes building or land appurtenant thereto, of which the assessee is the owner. Say I am the owner. Okay, I have let it on rent to some person. That person is running a shop in that house property. So how should I show? So he runs a shop in that. He makes a business and he will show his income as business income. But how should I show as I show the rent which I receive from him? It is income from house property only. It doesn't tell. It doesn't restrict the usage of the house property which you are lent. If you have let out any building, and if you are the owner of that, annual value will be taxed, no matter for what purpose it is used. So even though the house property which you have let is used for shop or any business, it would be treated as income from house property only. I hope I am clear in this. Next question is, how is composite rent treated? What is the composite rent? Composite rent means the rent which includes service charges also. Let's understand with an example. I have a house property and I have let it for some other person, let it out to some other person for rent. I have not only let out my house, but also I have installed some furniture in that house, or I might have installed some AC in that house, or I might have installed lift for that house. In all these cases, it is called composite rent. I am not charging the rent solely for the building, but for other services also, other things also. In that case, how it is treated? In some of the cases, say when you have let it out for business, but say you have let it out an house property, let out a house property, and that house property is used by an office, and you only are providing a watchman to that building for protecting that house property, and you are not, then that office is not paying the salary of the watchman. You as the owner are only paying the salary to the watchman, and you collect rent from that the person who is running the business in your property, and it includes all those, even the watchman salary or lift which you have provided, or any furniture or any fittings or any AC, everything is included in the rent which you are charging. In that case, how it should be taxed? If that is separable, it's not income. It's if it is inseparable, then it is not income from house property. What does inseparable mean? You can't distinguish what exactly is the amount which you charge for building and what exactly is the amount which you are charging for all other services like watchman salary or lift. If you cannot separate both of them, then you can't consider it as income from house property. You should consider it as income from other sources or income from business, if that is your business. What if it is separable? Income from house property to that extent. So if you can actually bifurcate in the agreement itself, he bifurcates. This much amount is for house property and this much amount is for other services like other furniture or any AC or lift. If there is separate bifurcation, then only to the extent which is allotted to house property can be treated as income from house property, and the rest should be treated as income from other sources or income from business, as the case may be. Can property tax paid by the tenant be deducted? So which section talks about property tax? That is first proviso to section 23 subsection 1. What does it say? If any tax is paid actually by him, so it is paid actually by him. Only if the property tax is paid by the tenant, you can claim it as deduction. Only if the property tax is paid by the owner, you can claim it as a deduction. If someone else, that is, say for example, tenant has paid the property tax, you can't claim it as deduction. So no, you can't claim the property tax paid by the tenant. You can't claim it as deduction. The next question is how to compute income from a self-occupied property which is let out for part of the year. Say you have two house properties and you are in occupation of both the house properties, and which is let out only for the part of the year. So after 6 months, suddenly you become interested in Adhyatma and say, do I need all this luxury? Do I need two house properties actually? So you start thinking about your life and say, okay, I don't need two house properties. I only need one house property. So you start staying in the house property in the middle of the year, only one house property. So what will you do with the other house property? You let it out. So in that case, what happens? It will be treated as let out house property only. Even though you have let out the house property for part of the year, it will be treated as let out house property for the full year, but rent only for the period for which it is let out is considered for gross annual value. So while computing gross annual value under section 23 subsection 1, you need to compute expected rent. Expected rent only for the period for which you have let out will be considered. or only for the period which the tenant has occupied the property will be considered for gross annual value. How to compute income from a self-occupied property, a part of which is let out. So there can be a situation where you have a house property which has two parts. Say most of the buildings have two floors basically. So if you have let out one floor as let out, if you have let out one floor and if you are using another floor for your own purpose, then how it is taxed? Both parts are considered as separate units only. So if you let out only a part of the house, no need it should be the separate floor. It can be one of the rooms of the same floor. If you have let out that, then both parts are considered separate units and will be charged to tax accordingly. These are some of the frequently asked questions. Let me recap all the things which I have already discussed. So first we knew there are 5 different heads of income: salary, income from house property, profits and gains from business or profession, capital gains and income from other sources as per section 14. Then we started discussing about income from house property particularly, and we then came to know not the rent will be taxed as treated as annual it will be treated as income from house property, but the annual value will be treated as income from house property. Then it should consist of building or land abutment thereto. It should be a building or land attached to the building. If it is a vacant land, then it's not coming under this income from house property. Then we came to know the assessee should be the owner of the house property, and if he is not the owner, then we can't treat that as income from house property. Then we discussed about if he uses it for his own business, then it won't come under income from house property. Then we moved on to section 23 for determination of annual value. Subsection 1 says the annual value should be computed in 3 steps. The first step is to compute reasonable expected rent from the property, and step 2 would be computation of actual rent of the property, and step 3 would be computation of gross annual value. Step 1, we considered municipal value or fair rental value, whichever is higher, but it should be limited to rent, standard rent specified under Rent Control Act. We understood the meaning of municipal value, fair rental value, and standard rent value. Municipal value is the value which the municipality fixes to determine the amount of property tax I should pay. Fair rent is the reasonable rent which is expected from the similar property in similar area. And standard rent means the maximum rent which owner can collect from the tenant as per Rent Control Act. After that, we saw an example. Then we went to computation of actual rent. Actual rent means the rent for the rent for which the property is let out during the year. While computing the rent, we cannot, actual rent we cannot deduct vacancy period rent. It would be deducted in the later stage. However, unrealized rent can be deducted only if certain conditions are satisfied. What are those conditions? Tenancy should be bona fide, and defaulting tenant has vacated the property, or steps have been taken to compel him to vacate the property, and the defaulting tenant is not in occupation of any other property of the taxpayer, or the taxpayer has taken all steps to recover such amount, including legal proceedings, or he satisfied the assessing officer that legal proceedings will be useless. If all these conditions are satisfied, then only we can deduct unrealized rent. Then we came to know gross annual value will be higher of step 1 amount and step 2 amount. Then we did some examples. Then we moved on to the proviso 1 of section 23 subsection 1. It says property tax paid can be deducted from gross annual value, but the conditions to be satisfied are it should be paid during the year, not just it's due in the year, it should be paid during the year, and it should be paid by him. It should actually be paid by the owner, not someone else. Then we understood how to calculate gross annual value in case of vacancy. Because of vacancy, if actual rent is less than expected rent, then actual rent only will be considered as gross annual value, not the higher of expected rent and actual rent. Then section 23(2), which deals with self-occupied house property. If you are in self-occupation of a house property, then you need not show any annual value. Your annual value of the house property will be nil. That benefit you can't claim if you have actually let out the house property, or you cannot claim that benefit if you own more than 2 house properties. If you own more than 2 house properties for the third property, you should compute annual value as per section 23 subsection 1. So we then studied combination of all these subsections. Then we moved on to section 23(5), which says if it is a stock in trade up to 2 years, you need not consider annual value. If your stock cannot be sold within 2 years, then from the third year, you have to show annual value of the property which is not sold. Then we moved on to deductions from income from house property. 30% ad hoc limit is there. 30% ad hoc deduction you can claim, and where property has been acquired or constructed or repaired or renewed from borrowed capital, then amount of interest claimed can be deducted. And also there is a limit, second proviso to section 24B, which says for self-occupied property only up to 2 lakh you can claim. And there is a concept called pre-construction period interest. If you have paid in any interest during the construction period, that interest you can't claim in the year in which you have paid the interest. Instead, you have to do the sum of all the interests which you have paid during the construction period, and you have to divide it by 5, and you have to claim it during the next 5 years. It is pertinent to note that for self-occupied house property, 2 lakh is the limit, right? So 2 lakh includes pre-construction period interest. If your actual interest paid during the year is 2 lakh and pre-construction period is 1 lakh, that is 5 lakh divided by 5, 1 lakh, then it comes to 3 lakh. But you can't claim 3 lakh as the deduction. Only 2 lakh you can claim as deduction for self-occupied house property. That limit is applicable. Then section 25 says if it is the interest is paid outside India, then you can't claim deduction unless you have deducted TDS and paid to the government. Section 25A deals about unrealized rent which is received subsequently. You have to show the unrealized rent as income from house property in the year of receipt. No matter if you are in the possession of the house or not. You can claim 30% deduction, however. Then we move on to property owned by co-owners. If 2 or more people own the house property simultaneously, each person will be treated as separate individual only, and it won't be treated as association of persons. Each individual has to show his share of income, and each individual can claim his share of expenses or deductions. Then we started discussing about the concept of deemed owner. Deemed owner is a person who is not the owner but will be considered as owner for this the purpose of income from house property. If an individual transfers any property without adequate consideration, even though he is not the owner, he will be treated as owner and he will be taxed. In case of impartible estate, he will be the owner. In case of cooperative society which allots individual units of houses to its members, the members will be considered as owners of the part of the property which is allotted to them. In case of lease, if it is more than 12 years, then the lessee will be considered as the owner of the property. So then we moved on to computation of income from house property. What are the steps in the computation? We solved an example. Then we came to know there are as per section 70, we can set off loss from one source under the same head with loss income from other source under the same head. So intra-head set off of losses. If there is income from one source under income from house property, there is one house property, and there is loss from another house property, you can set off each one with other without any limit. Then inter-head set off. But in case of inter-head set off, there is a limit of 2 lakh. More than 2 lakh, you cannot set off during the year. However, that any amount which cannot be set off during the year will be carried forward to the following years for up to 8 assessment years. And 71B says it can be carried forward up to 8 years. Then we dealt with an example. Then 80EEA, which tells what in addition to the interest deduction which you claim under section 24B, you can claim 1,50,000 additional amount here. But you should note that if you have already claimed the deduction under 24B, you can't claim it again here. For self-occupied house property, anyhow, there is only 2 lakh. For let out house property, you can claim any amount of interest as deduction. If you have deducted all the interest there, you can't again claim here. Only once the deduction can be claimed. However, if you have paid 3,50,000 interest, 2 lakh you can claim there for self-occupied house property, and 1,50,000 you can claim here. For suppose you have 3,50,000 interest you have paid, it is for let out house property. You can claim 3,50,000 in 24B itself. Again, you can't claim 1,50,000 here. Then we discuss some of the frequently asked questions. Rental from subletting is treated as income from other sources, and shop is income from rent from shop is treated as income from house property only. And composite rent, if it is inseparable, it's not income from house property. If it is separable, then income from house property to that extent. Then can property tax be deducted if the tenant paid the tax? No, only if the owner pays the tax, he can deduct. So if SOP is let out for the part of the year, only for that part of the year, the expected rent and actual rent, everything should be calculated and annual value should be arrived at. And if the income from house property, which is partly let out, only for that part, the annual value should be considered, and the both parts will be considered as separate units. Now this is all about income from house property. And one other thing I would like to touch upon. You may be your business itself may be renting out the house property. Say you have so many houses and you treat that letting out of the house property as business. Can you claim that? So what difference does it make? In income from house property, you can claim only these deductions. What are the deductions? 30% of annual value, property tax, and interest paid. Whereas if you show the same income as income from business or profession, saying that my business itself is letting out the house property, you can claim all the expenses. Any expenses which is related to business, say traveling expense, everything you can claim as business expense and show loss also. So can you claim that it is a matter of litigation? The onus is on you to prove that it's actually your business. The adjudicating authority might not be easily convinced as to it is actually your business. So this is all about the income from house property. So is rent from the vacant land considered as income from house property? No, it is income from other sources because it is a land, but it's not appurtenant to a building. So it is considered as income from other sources. Yeah. Thank you. This is all I have to say. If there are any doubts, I'm ready to take. Hello?
Hello, sir. One
Yeah.
minute, let me check if there's any doubt.
In the chat box, I can see one question. Is the half interest shared? I assume that this is a situation where husband and wife both are co-owning the property and the loan is in the joint name. In that case, the half of the interest can be claimed by one person and half can be claimed by the other person.
I think there's just one question that way.
Yeah.
Anybody who doubts, please let
I
us
can't
know.
hear you properly, Divya. Hello?
Am I
Yeah.
audible?
Yeah.
Hello, sir, is it
Hello.
audible now?
Yeah, it's now audible. Yeah.
Anybody who's attending here, please, if you have any doubts, let us know in the chat box.
Yeah.
I think they have no doubts, sir.
Yeah.
I
I
think
hope you understood the provisions.
yes, sir, I did. It was really interesting.
Yeah. Thank you.
And also, I like the fact that you said that learning from a common man's perspective is more important to understanding.
Yeah.
Thank you so much, sir. I think we can wind off.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you everyone for attending.
Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you.